Hello, and welcome to the Eugene Real Estate Podcast. I am your host, Vince Casey. This is the first podcast devoted entirely to the Eugene real estate market, where every month we bring on local experts to discuss current trends to help us navigate the ever-changing landscape that is real estate. The Eugene Real Estate Podcast is now sponsored by House to Home Construction. House to Home Construction. Love where you live. This month we have the good fortune to be joined by Matthew Gardner. Matthew is the chief economist at Windemere Real Estate. He is responsible for analyzing and interpreting economic data and its impact on the real estate market on both a local and national level. Today, he brings that knowledge to us here in Lane County. Matthew, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Vince. Great to be here.
I'm so glad to have you on. The first time I saw you was at the Valley River Inn, and you were talking in front of about 200 people, and everybody was hanging on your words. So we're excited to have you on.
That's wow. Yeah, Valley River Inn. That place still exists. Yeah, it's very very kind of you, and it's always nice when an economist can actually have people hanging on their every word. Kind of a rare occurrence.
Absolutely. In our industry, you need to stay in your lane. So it's good for us to get our information from an economist like you.
Thank you.
Of course. In your top 10 predictions for 2023, you stated that rates would begin to drop in the fall. Now, lo and behold, right in about mid-November, they began to go down for the first time in almost 2 years. What did you see that gave you the confidence to make that prediction?
Well, wow. I guess I'd start off by saying thank you for the compliment. However, rates are certainly still higher than, yes, I thought they were going to go down, but they're far higher today than I thought they would be. And I guess to try and explain that a little bit, let me explain how rates are set. Everything is based upon the yield on 10-year treasuries, right? You take the yield on 10-year paper, add on a risk premium. That's what mortgage rates should be. Well, the trouble is we had a fairly significant bout of inflation. And then, of course, we had the Fed and Federal Reserve doing what one of their two jobs, which is to create what's called price stability, so stable inflation. They kind of went at it. And because of that, we saw rates skyrocket because yield on 10-year treasuries skyrocketed. And so where we are today is, yes, it's coming down, and I honestly believe that will continue. However, it's certainly starting from a point that's higher than myself or, quite frankly, any other economist had expected.
Yeah, absolutely. I talked to two lenders today before I came on the show today, and I got confirmation that they are finding rates at around 6.8. So it seems like it's dropping more dramatically than I thought it would.
Wow, 6.8. Yeah, so we had the job numbers came out today, depending on when you broadcast this. That actually we had some slightly upward pressure on rates because of it, because they were the numbers are a bit better than some had expected. However, we're certainly still around that. Last time I looked at the below 7.1. So I'll take 7.1 over 8, and don't forget we were at 8% just 6 short weeks ago. So is it trending the right direction? And trends are things that us economists always love. Then yes, that's certainly the case.
Yeah, you absolutely broke the news on that one. I think that the news or the news media is usually kind of late to the party on these things. So you were the first person I heard that rates had dropped. Thank you for being so on top of that.
Thank you. You're welcome.
So nowadays, one of the buzzwords we've been hearing is recession. Certain circles or the news is saying a recession is coming. Do you believe that a recession is imminent? And if so,
Hmm.
how is that likely to affect the housing market here in Oregon?
Well, I okay, I'm kind of tooting my own horn a bit. I actually was one of the first analysts that suggested that we actually weren't going to have a recession. I said that about 9 months ago, and for quite some time, I was kind of scoffed at. Everyone said, "Oh no, it's Gardner, idiot, not going to happen." Well, a couple of months ago, I think Morgan Stanley came out and they got on board with it. They put a paper out saying that yeah, a soft landing is certainly achievable, and therefore we aren't necessarily going to have a recession. So, but here's the thing though. Um, the expectation is that we will have a recession. Why? Well, economists and quite frankly, a lot of people, you look at history and history says, okay, what's going on? Well, the yield curve is inverted, which means that the interest rate on short term treasuries is higher than long term. And that's always a great precursor to a recession. The Chicago Purchasers Managers Index is below 50. ISM Manufacturing Index is low. Consumer confidence expectations is low. And that should say, go, okay, we're guaranteed we're going to have a recession. But I don't think we are. I think that it's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out. But in my opinion, it is quite likely the Fed could orchestrate a soft landing for the economy, which is obviously their goal. The trouble is they've been really bad at it. They've got it right twice in history. So I think they actually could. And if they do, all credit to them. We will skate through next year without a recession. We will see some job losses, don't get me wrong. We will. But in general, I'm not that overly concerned. And as far as Oregon's concerned and Eugene, yeah, it'll mean slowing job creation. That's fairly understandable. But in general, it's nothing, quite frankly, that today I'm particularly worried about.
Yeah. Do you think that the rates climbing higher kind of was pushing the was almost pushing that recession narrative, and now that they start to drop, that so many people get paid when you close a house, like the mortgage broker, the realtor, the contractor, the title person. Now that activity is going to pick up, that kind of releases that narrative a little bit, does it not?
And it could, but I would say think about things in a slightly different way. Um, how does the housing market perform during recessionary periods? Now, everyone's going to think, oh, wow, 2007, we have a recession, the housing market collapses. They're wrong. Recession 1980, housing price went up by 8.3%. 81, they rose by about 3.5%. 1991, yes, they dropped by a whopping 1.9%. 2001 recession up by 6.6, and 2007, one everyone looks at, yes, they were down by almost 20%. But it's because the recession was caused by what? By housing. So my opinion is that even if we do see a technical recession, technical being two negative quarters of growth relative to GDP, yeah, I mean, I'm really not concerned about it at all. So, yeah, I think that from the housing market perspective, interest rates, we'll talk about that more, I'm sure, later on, have a significant influence. And quite frankly, housing is remarkably important to the economy in general. Maybe we'll talk about that later on as well. But what I'm looking at the world today and look at the US, yeah, I think that I would be very surprised if we do enter a recession. I think the Fed will keep rates higher for a while. Then they'll start bringing them down likely late spring of next year. Not to the level we'd like to see, but they're going to start easing the levels that we see on the Fed funds rate. Um, we're going to get through this. I really think we are.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for bringing that to our attention. Here in Lane County, we were on a pretty steady diet of homes appreciating around 6 to 9% annually. Last year, we saw our first dip in a while at 4%. Do you foresee homes continuing to depreciate?
Wow. But I think that the term depreciation is not quite the right term to use. Um, Prices are still going up, so they are still appreciating, but just at a lower pace, and that's okay. No, I think that in fact this year we still got one more month of data to come. It will still show positive annual growth, marginal, but still will be positive. And next year, I think that will continue, but it's certainly going to be at a far lower pace than homeowners have become accustomed to. And that's okay. Now, it's still a bit early for my forecast for 2024, but as I said, I think it's going to be positive, but likely in the low single digits. Now, again, that's nothing that you're used to. certainly different from Zillow's forecast, by the way, which, by the way, is negative for next year. But here's what I'm worried about: is that there's a mismatch between income growth and home price growth. Let me give you a very brief example. Between 2017 and 2022, median household income rose by 20%. Not bad, not bad at all. But the median single family resale home price increased by what? By 73%. Something's got to give. And so, because of that mismatch between income growth and home price growth, and also given where interest rates are today, although they are going to be coming down, it still will, we won't be back in that sub 3% world that some have become used to. It just screams the fact to me that we will see slower price growth going forward. And that really is not a bad thing.
Wow, you really nailed, I think, the core issue there with the home growth outpacing people's checkbook. But hopefully that will see some relief here in the future. Now that most of 2023 is in the rearview mirror and we've had a chance to see your predictions land, I'm very curious what your predictions are for 2024. What do you foresee in the coming year?
Well, that's a very broad question. I guess the first thing I would say is there's still no housing bubble. Now, why do I say that? Well, I said it last year, and I'm saying it again because the market actually outperformed. A lot of people expected the housing market to have uh, contracted very significantly through the course of this year. And as you mentioned earlier, yeah, it slowed down in terms of price growth, but it was still growth. Now, that's led some people to say, okay, well, that happened, that's fine. But it means that we're still going to see a massive drop next year, right? Now, I don't see that happening. So I think it's really highly implausible. And number two, prices. Yes, I think they go up by, but not by that much. As I said a few minutes ago, I think we'll see likely figures in the low single digits. Uh, well, probably it's going to, I think, I would argue, be better in Eugene. It will be nationally. Nationally, I'm looking at about 1%. But also, we're stuck with a situation next year, which actually is supportive of home values, and that is no one's selling. And no one's selling. Why? Because a lot of people are sat on a remarkably low mortgage rate. So why would they? So I expect we will see probably some increase in inventory, but it still will be a supply starved market. Of that, I have no doubt. The other side of the equation is going to be foreclosures. Yeah, they will rise, but quite frankly, they're going to rise by a very modest level, not enough to cause a big push in inventory, therefore, an increase in supply, therefore, lower price growth. New construction is another interesting part of the equation. We'll see the share of new homes increase, but it's still going to be at very low levels. We'd be very surprised if that changes. So builders are building more, but it's still very expensive for them. Housing affordability is going to get worse, believe it or not. And that's a big thing for housing affordability. And I say that because in Lane County, 17% of homes that sold in the third quarter of this year were affordable to households making median income. That is a ridiculously low number. And so affordability is a big problem. Again, it goes back to the income disparity that we're seeing here. And I mentioned about foreclosures. So, yeah, delinquency rates are rising, but they're going to trend back to the long-term average. Not overly concerned about that at all. So I think 2024, in summary, will be a market that we're going to see mortgage rates drop. We should end the year closer to 6 than 7. Market's not going to collapse at all, but price growth will be certainly far lower than some people had expected. And the biggest concern is one I've always had, that's first-time buyers. They're going to get stuck. They can't afford to buy a home.
Yeah, I've definitely experienced that as an agent with boots on the ground. It's a big concern, and I hope that we come up with something for them soon. One thing that I heard about your 2024 predictions is it seems like they're fairly broad numbers that cover most of the West Coast. Is there anything that is specific to Eugene or something that makes Lane County special or specific? Or,
Lane County is always special. I mean, so right, foreclosure starts. I ignore foreclosure filings because somebody can get themselves straight if they're a homeowner. So yeah, our foreclosure starts up 10%, sure. But how many units were going through that process? 34. It.
wow,
So again, any big jump on that, not going to happen. I mentioned 70% of homes were affordable. That's a bad place to be. Permits now in Lane County, single family permits. Sure, it's you pulled 865, I think, in 2022. Um, I think you'll do. We'd be surprised to see you matching that level, but we are seeing an increased interest in duplexes, likely because of Governor Brown and her changes in the law in respect to the ability to build multifamily product. So you might see a few more, but again, even then, it outpaced last year. But even at the 34 units, is still not enough. The other part about it, again, is on a local basis, it is price growth. As I said, I think that prices will rise next year, but more so than the US. But you'll still be down in, I think, that 3 to 4% range. And as you said earlier, um, something that's a level we haven't become used to.
yeah, I definitely am concerned about new construction in Oregon. It seems like the pricing of construction just keeps going north. Are there any type of stipends or anything being developed by the federal government or the local government here that you're aware of that is creating incentive for builders, or more specifically for builders dedicated to low income housing?
Um, well, that's two very, very specific questions. One of which is, well, as you know, Governor Brown, like a couple of years ago now, signed legislation that allowed the development of duplexes up to 6 unit developments, depending on where in the state you are, within any single family zoned area. Now, I think that's a great thing. We understand that in Oregon, as we see in California and up here in Washington, we're land constrained, right? We have remarkably arduous growth management restrictions that limit where you can build. Okay. But it's, in fact, we've only got so much land. So I think as we go forward, the issue that I'm seeing is that they're allowing that. That's fine. Is it going to get pushed back? Yes, it will. Why? Well, I'll say this that I think it's appropriate. Even though the West Coast markets, the better part, California, Oregon, Washington, are remarkably liberal, when it comes to housing, I've always been of the opinion that liberalism ends at the driveway. It's something that could negatively impact our housing value. We don't want it. So there's going to be pushback in that respect. But with the fact we've only got so much land, we understand that. Construction costs have softened, there is no doubt, but labor supply is remarkably low, and that makes labor costs high. And regulatory fees. I would say if there's one thing that any area could do is that let's look at the regulatory fees that cities charge builders to allow them to build housing. And if we can make some changes there, that will certainly help. But it's going to be very hard, again, specifically for those first time buyers, not for the likes of myself. I've owned housing, thankfully, and very luckily for a number of years. But I look at my son who's at Gonzaga University right now. Where is he going to be able to afford a home in 4 or 5 years? It's going to be very hard. I'll tell you one thing, he's not moving back in with me.
I hear that. Yeah, I definitely advocate for low income housing, and I'm ready to go on board wherever it takes. Hopefully, we'll come
And
up
by
with.
the way, I'm sorry, on the low income side, you have to be careful. So there are a lot of great creators of low income, quote, low income housing, where my biggest concern is it's actually not in the low income cohort. It's in that 80 to 120% of median income. And I think it's the workforce housing cohort. That's where we have, I think, a far greater deficit in terms of supply.
I helped a first time home buyer in September get into their house, and I believe the house was priced at 360. And with their rate and everything, I believe their monthly payment was right around 2,800 a month, which obviously they probably could have rented that house for around 2 grand. So
Yep. Wow.
it's a big ask for sure.
Yes, it is, no doubt.
Well, now that we've seen rates begin their decline, is there a magic number that you see rates getting to that'll really push the market again?
Wow. Yes, they have come down, and the, your listeners out there, are they going to continue to come down? I believe they will. And quite frankly, I don't know any economist that thinks they're going to go up higher again. We'll see some shifts up and down, but in general, the trend will be lower. But here's the thing: buyers are out there. We know that transactions are still happening. Why are they still happening? Well, most of them, they're kind of hedging. They believe that rates will come down, so I can buy now and accept a horrible mortgage rate, but in a couple of years, rates will have dropped and I can refi into a lower mortgage rate. Okay. But here's the problem. It's not on the supply side. What's wrong? Sorry, not on the demand side. Demand is there. It's on the supply side. And why do I say that? Well, we're in a situation today that we've got 85.5% of homeowners in Oregon State with a mortgage have got a rate below or at or below 5%. 25% have got a rate at or below 3%. Why would you sell? You won't, unless you have to. And you will for the three classic reasons: job change, death, divorce. But what we're missing is the other D, discretionary. Now, I think when rates come down, as they continue to come down, which I believe they will, once you get to within 1.5% of the mortgage rate that you currently have, well, then it's less compelling to stay put. And then I think you'll think about moving. So I think that that's the kind of level I'm looking at. Now, that will change obviously over time as rates come down. That should free up more inventory. But it's going to have to be in that 1.5% of where somebody currently has a rate.
Right. So we're basically looking at below 5% to really see a really big uptick in the market.
A big uptick, yeah.
Yeah.
I think once we get down into the low sixes, that will certainly start freeing inventory up, no doubt. Will it be what brokers want to see? No, it won't be. It'll be what home buyers want to see. They want to see more supply because that means that price growth slows and it makes a better market for them. Just going to take some time.
Yeah. I think the realtors want it to be 2021 forever. that
Not
was,
going to happen. We are never, ever wrong. I can't say never, ever. It's highly, highly unlikely we will ever see mortgage rates drop down on a 30 below 3. No, I think the terminal rate is between 5 and 5.5%.
well, heard it here, folks. Don't hold your breath for rates dropping below 3%.
Don't do that.
Well, it's been wonderful having you on. That was all the questions I have for you. Is there any words of wisdom you want to leave us with that are specifically for us here in Lane County?
Oh, sure. I think that, well, one, you see, I'm in Seattle. I can't really talk too much about your Oregon football team. So I'll leave that one alone. I, but I think that what I would say for Lane County is what I would say in general. And that is the fact that the, for your audience, they're interested in buying a home. Good for you. It is by far the way that a vast majority of this country's population make their money. Totally get it. Don't go stupid. Don't extend yourself. Don't go too mad. That's a silly thing to do. Wait, that's going to be okay. It will come to you. So don't jump in just because you think it's the right thing to do. However, is home ownership the way that we create wealth? Absolutely it is. In Lane County, you'll see price growth slowing. I'm okay with that. We won't turn negative, unlike many parts of the country, quite frankly. But it will be a lot slower in terms of appreciation. And I'm totally fine with that. So expect to see a modest increase in listings next year. That will lead to a modest increase in sales next year. Mortgage rates will drop down from where they are today, about 7.1. I expect them to be around 6% by this time next year. No, it's not what you'd like to see, but it's still a hell of a lot better than they were in October of 1982 when mortgage rates were at 18%.
Amen to that. Well, if somebody wants to follow you online or get more wisdom from you, what's the best way to find you out there?
On Facebook and Instagram, M Gardner, Gardner, Econ. And on LinkedIn, it's going to be MJD Gardner.
Wonderful. Yeah. And I just saw your 2024 predictions on YouTube. So that's a great way to follow you as well. Yeah, everyone, Matthew Gardner, he's a wealth of wisdom. I just want to thank you so much for coming on the show. That's all the questions we had for you tonight. Thank you again for coming on today, Matthew, and for being our guest today. And I'd like to thank our sponsor, House to Home Construction. And I'd like to thank all of you for listening. Next month's guest is Dan Gandy from the Operative Group, and we will be discussing ADUs and short-term rentals. Good night, and we'll see you next time.
If you have a question for the show, feel free to email us at eugenerealestatepodcast@gmail.com. If you would like to work with Vince Casey as a buyer or seller, please email him at vincecaseyrealestate@gmail.com. Be sure to mention this podcast with House to Home Construction to receive up to $500 off any roof bid from a competitor in writing.